Welcome, everyone, to today's virtual conference, Real Estate and Technology. We're delighted that you're all here with us today. I'm Laura Fetter, Program Manager of the Wilbur F. Breslin Center for Real Estate Studies at Hofstra. This event is made possible through the collaboration of the Breslin Center and the Frank G. Zarb School of Business. And I want to especially thank Professor Nikvat and Professor Spieler for their hard work and dedication in putting this conference together. And on behalf of the Breslin Center's director, Professor Ashira Ostrow, who was also the academic dean of the Hofstra School of Law, she was not able to join us today, but we truly hope that you enjoyed today's conference. It is now my privilege to introduce Dr. K.G. Viswanathan, Vice Dean of the Zarb School of Business. Dr. Viswanathan received a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from the Regional Engineering College in India, an MBA in finance from Western Michigan University, and a PhD from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Before coming to Hofstra, Dr. Viswanathan taught investments and corporate finance at the University of Tennessee. His research and teaching interests include international finance and banking, corporate finance, international mergers, and international stock listings. He has presented several papers at the Eastern Finance Association, Allied Social Sciences Association, Midwest Finance Association, and Financial Management Association meetings, as well as the Global Finance Conference. He is on the editorial board of the Ames International Journal of Management and has served as an ad hoc reviewer for the Financial Review, Financial Management, and Emerging Market Financial Trends, just to name a few. Dr. Viswanathan frequently reviews textbooks in the areas of international and corporate finance. He is a CFA charter holder and a member of the CFA Institute and the New York Society of Security Analysts. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Viswanathan.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for the introduction. Again, as Laura mentioned, I have the pleasure and privilege of serving as the Vice Dean in the Zarb School of Business. And today my role is to introduce the keynote speakers. But before I do that, I would like to thank all the attendees for coming to this conference, all the panelists, as well as the keynote speakers for their presentations. And most importantly, I would like to thank Dr. Nikvat, Dr. Spieler, as well as Dr. Ostrow, who's not here today, as well as Laura for putting together this conference. I believe it's been about 16 years ago that we started with this real estate conference, and Zarb School is very proud to be associated with this conference. We have been having some interesting conversations during these conferences, and I'm sure it's going to continue today also. Okay, so I will be very brief in my introduction of the two keynote speakers here because I want to give them more time for their presentation. Both of them are very accomplished. They have a long list of accomplishments, but I'm going to only highlight a few of those things. Let me start with the first keynote speaker, Brad Case. Brad Case is the chief economist for Middleburg Communities, where he provides analytical support for executive level and market-focused tactical decisions. Dr. Case has researched residential and non-residential real estate markets domestically and globally for more than 30 years, and he's a frequent contributor to this conference. Prior to Middleburg Communities, he had worked as an economist with Fannie Mae, NAREIT, and the Federal Reserve Board. His research encompasses various topics in investments and real estate markets. Dr. Case holds patents as the co-inventor of the FTSE NAREIT Pure Property Index methodology and the backward-forward trading contract. He has been a frequent speaker at the real estate and investment conferences. Dr. Case earned degrees from Williams College and the University of California at Berkeley, and his PhD in economics at Yale University, where he worked with Nobel Prize-winning economist Robert Shiller. So today, Dr. Case is going to talk about using big data and non-artificial intelligence in real estate development, and I'm sure we all look forward to hearing from you. Dr. Case, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Viswanathan. I'm happy to be with you, and I'm happy to be back at this conference. So thank you for inviting me. So as Dr. Viswanathan said, here we are. I wanted to talk about using big data and non-artificial intelligence in real estate development. and I wanted to share some of the things that we here at Middleburg Communities do using big data and non-artificial intelligence. And if I think about sort of the steps in real estate development as we think about it, we start by using our data to target markets and evaluate locations. And then there are design decisions and then underwriting to make sure that the project will work and in the process of raising money to finance it. And then pre-construction and construction activities followed by asset management activities after the project is in place. Today, I am not going to talk at all about the design or pre-construction and construction pieces, although our company is working on that, especially right now in pre-construction. So I want to sort of take that as a way of framing my discussion and think first about how we use big data and non-artificial intelligence in market targeting. And if you think about the traditional and absolutely dominant way of doing market targeting in real estate is by going to cocktail parties and talking to other people. And to me, that is not a very, it may be an enjoyable way to do market targeting. It's not a very effective one. When I first started with this company, there were lots of people talking about, there are lots of people who are excited about prospects for development in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I was like, why Chattanooga? And it took me the longest time to find out that really what people like about Chattanooga is that if you live in Atlanta, it's a nice place to spend the weekend. Well, that's very different from being a pleasant, an appealing market for real estate development. So, so if you're going to move away from cocktail parties as the main way of gathering data to target markets, then we can think about, artificial intelligence. So where do we stand with artificial intelligence? Well, artificial intelligence is a big black box. And the problem with any black box is absolutely the problem right now with what is commonly being called artificial intelligence, which is it's absolutely garbage in and therefore no surprise garbage out. And there are side effects. So I'll give you an example. Just recently, I was talking with somebody else who had been pitched with a project by a company, a very large company that was very proud of their artificial intelligence. And so he asked a fairly innocuous question about evaluating which variables were most important. And their response was, they had no idea. And therefore they lost credibility. They were hoping that people would be impressed by their use of artificial intelligence. And instead people were shocked that they had no idea what they were doing with artificial intelligence. So let me talk a little bit about what we do with big data and non-artificial intelligence. And with respect to market targeting, we use multiple sources of data. Big data means lots and lots of data. We use lots and lots of data from lots of different sources. And I give some examples here. We use lots of different variables. And part of what we're trying to accomplish, and I'll revisit this, is making our analysis robust. We don't want a perfect analysis that makes use of one imperfect piece of data. In practice, we analyze conditions for 120 markets in our part of the country, roughly 600 counties, a whole bunch of submarkets and census tracts, and 55,000 census block groups. We update these analyses quarterly, and it's set up so that it can be updated more frequently if we need to do that. And I want to talk a little bit about the analytical methods we use. Arithmetic methods like just simple averages, medians, ratios, and that sort of thing are very useful, as long as they're well thought out. Linear regression and relevance-based regression are very useful to us, and we use machine learning in some key respects. So when people talk about artificial intelligence, in many situations, they're talking about large language models like ChatGPT. Artificial intelligence encompasses a lot of different modeling techniques, many of which are really understood as machine learning techniques like random forest. So let me take as an example how we use big data and non-artificial intelligence to do housing market forecasts at the market level. So here's an example of a forecast that we produced not long ago for the Charlotte, North Carolina metro area. And the reason I brought up this chart is I want to emphasize how important it is for people who are using artificial intelligence to have some idea of how much confidence they should have in their forecasts. So we do believe that rents in the Charlotte, effective rents in the Charlotte metro area will reach bottom sometime this year and then start going up again fairly impressively. But we do keep in mind the very, very substantial possibility that they may continue going down through really much of the next year, much or all of the next year. So it's very important to pay attention to the uncertainties in the numbers that are coming out of your analysis. Now, let me talk more specifically about how we do supply and demand forecasts. We use linear regression and relevance-based regression. And by the way, we do these again at the market level and also at the county level. So I'm not going to go in detail through this spreadsheet, but these are all the computations that go into what's at the very end, which is an estimate of oversupply in any particular market. So as we see, for example, in Abilene, our latest forecast is for a little bit of an oversupply, but in Albany, Georgia, our latest forecast suggests that it's undersupplied over the next 3 years. Now, what's much more important is the oversupply situation in the places that we are most likely to develop in. So what we do is we focus very carefully on what are the key pieces of this analysis that we need to do well. So for one of them, for example, is we observe the current headship rate. The headship rate is simply the number of households the number of adults divided by the number of, the number of households per adult. And so roughly it tends to be around 0.5. But we forecast changes at the market and county level in the headship rate, the number of households per adult. And that forecast is very important to get right. Similarly, we observe the current rentership rate, how many of the current households rent their housing. And we focus very hard on doing a good job of forecasting changes over the next 3 years in the rentership rate by market and county. We do the same thing with estimated number of renter households per employed resident. That builds on our forecast of growth in employment. And then in the lower right, we have another key piece, which is forecasting supply, or is a change in supply over the next 3 years. We use 2 different ways of doing that, a linear regression model and a relevance-based regression model. So we do pay a lot of attention to what are the key pieces where we need to get them right if we're going to have an advantage over other developers, and if we're going to be able to convince our investment partners that they should entrust their equity or debt investments to us. On top of that, we need to make our analyses transparent to the people within this company. It does me no good to put together a good model if people within the company don't have confidence in it. So this is just a view of an internal dashboard that's available to all of the decision makers, senior and junior, in the company, to use the data that we've collected and the analyses that we've collected to put together the same numbers that are shown in that spreadsheet that I just showed you. And here again are some of the key pieces of information. Somebody is drawing on the screen, so perhaps we could try to make that not happen anymore. And we use these analyses to target our markets. So in this case, it's very important to use a fairly simple way of doing it, so that again, we don't have a very precise wrong analysis. And so this is just a screenshot of the analyses of the market targeting sort of final step, where we gather information from different sources, and we simply, you can see in the upper right corner, we are counting up the number of criteria on which a given market is better than its peers. And so we are trying to target markets that appear to be better than their peers across most of the analyses that we conduct. Okay, as I said, we update this every quarter, and we can update it more frequently than that. So we try to avoid the high wire by using this, by doing very careful analyses, but then using a very robust approach to our final evaluation of target markets using these data. All right, so let me turn to the next piece of the project, which is location evaluation. And again, the traditional approach is not a very efficient one. You drive around a market, and we operate in up to 120 markets. So if this were our approach, we would spend a huge amount of time driving and a huge amount of time trying to take notes and pass along notes. And that's not a very productive way to do it, but it is very much the dominant way of evaluating locations in our field. So what we do is we make use of a traditional but more data-based approach, which is to think about the key variables that we want to see good values on, and to set thresholds for them, and say, all right, we like this area if it is exceeding the thresholds on a large number of key variables. But what does that give you? I'll show you a map of Austin, Texas, where we, as I said, we do make use of this approach. So we've said, all right, for all of these locations in Austin, Texas, how many of those key variables at least meet our thresholds for employment and school quality and all that sort of thing. And the thing is, in a place like Austin, it is almost every part of the entire market. So the question is is this helpful? Does that really give you some actionable information in terms of looking for a piece of land to develop and thinking about something more promising than just, oh yeah, Austin seems good? So again, we go back to the same data sources and methods that we use in general. But in this case, I'm going to show you something that we do at the census block group level using machine learning, which is a form of artificial intelligence. But crucially, it's a form of artificial intelligence in which we can really see what's going on and which variables are most important and why they are most important. So when we do that and we look at the same view of Austin, but the darker colors here are places that are more interesting for development of the kind of property that we develop, which is middle market Class A residential rental housing communities. We see Austin's a great city, but there is clear differentiation within Austin in terms of where we should really be targeting. And once we found a piece of land, how we evaluate the location of that piece of land. So this is something that's much more actionable, much easier for our land acquisition team to say, all right, I'm making a trip to Austin, and I'm not going to just drive around all over the place. I'm going to look at the areas that are darker blue in this map. So now let's talk about underwriting and the asset management function. And I'm not going to go into very much detail about how this happens because it's very complicated. But I want to talk a little bit about the general thrust of it, which is we're looking at our property, whether we own it or whether we are building it. We're looking at comparables in that market. We're using the unit and property descriptions of the comparables and our unit to evaluate the rents that are being charged, and we're making adjustments. So we're saying, all right, in this community, they're charging a higher rent, and that's because they have a roof terrace or something like that. And also an important part of the process of underwriting or asset management is what do we expect the exit cap rate to be? So what are the traditional ways of doing that? Well, the trial and error method. The trial and error method means let's try something, and if we go bankrupt, we'll know we made a mistake. The exit cap rate, the most common thing people do is ask brokers what they think the exit cap rate will be. Not long ago, somebody in my company came to me and said, what's your thought of Fort Walton Beach, Florida? Because a broker tells us that they're getting 3.5% exit cap rates. And I scoffed at that. I don't think that has been true for many years. And even at its best, that was a very aggressive cap rate. So if somebody actually paid it, I would be surprised. but if they did pay it, I'll be a little bit surprised if they're still in business. So what we want is something a little bit better than this. And again, we go to the same types of analysis, same types of data that we use for other purposes, but here we're developing a hedonic rent model where we use the characteristics of the existing properties and to value what our properties would rent for in the 55,000 locations across our part of the country. We also use a hedonic price model, and we actually use cap rates that are implied by those hedonic price models. So let me just take a quick look at how this all works. So first of all, I'm looking at locational attributes like job proximity, and using our hedonic rent model, I can actually go to a place like Austin and say, all right, first cut, here's what I would expect our property to rent for in each of these locations of Austin. Now, this doesn't mean that it's going to be an appealing place to develop, but if we find a piece of land there, this is going to help in the underwriting process for figuring out how much we should expect to earn in rent for our properties in those locations. And then if I then use the combination of the hedonic rent model and the hedonic price model to look at cap rates, this is in the very earliest stages. In fact, I just started doing this last week, and this is the first set of numbers I produced from this. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done here, but figuring out current and future cap rates is an extraordinarily important piece of what we do. And so this is one way of looking at that. Another way of looking at that is to look at the stock prices of apartment REITs whose portfolios aren't that different from ours. So when we do that, we get a set of implied cap rates. We can combine this data from the public markets with our own analyses from the private markets, including our own data, to come up with better understanding of the cap rates that we should expect to be looking at when we build or acquire or sell a property later on. And then the final piece of that is we also try to forecast movements in cap rates two different ways. We try to forecast actual cap rates using the vector error correction model, or we try to forecast the probability that there will be an increase in cap rates. So this is another thing that I have been playing with, and I expect to be revisiting this substantially over the next couple of months to get a better model of when we should expect to see changes in cap rates. All right, so that's a sort of a rundown of how we use big data and non-artificial intelligence in real estate development. If I want to focus on some key takeaways, all right, avoid going to cocktail parties unless you're there to mislead your friends. Avoid any sort of black boxes. Avoid artificial non-intelligence, which is what we have now, until it becomes intelligent or you become intelligent about how to do it. And avoid wasting time in cars. Use data from all available sources. Use and analyze data at all different levels we don't do state level analyses, but from market down to census block group and lower. And use all available empirical methods. There are some terrific empirical methods, but you have to learn how to use them. More generally, as general rules, think your problem through carefully. Figure out where you are most likely to make a mistake that's costly, or where you are most likely to be able to do something that puts your competitors at a disadvantage relative to you. Always remember that your data are messy, your analytical methods are difficult, and therefore avoid the high wire. Use robust methods. Be transparent within your company as well as externally, and keep moving forward, meaning always be improving the data you use and the methods that you use to analyze that data. If you don't follow those rules, you'll be stuck with the people who don't really know what they're doing, which, let's be honest, are most of the people in our industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brad. I know there are questions from the audience, but we are going to ask you to hold on to them until we have the second keynote speech also, and then we can, at that point in time, we can open up to both keynote speakers for questions. So let me take this opportunity to introduce our second keynote speaker, Dr. Ali Parhizgari. Dr. Parhizgari is Professor of Finance and International Business at Ryder Systems Research Fellow at Florida International University. He's a leading scholar in the areas of global financial strategies, corporate governance and finance, international finance, investment, and quantitative techniques. His research has been published in a number of academic journals, such as the Journal of Corporate Finance, European Journal of Finance, and Journal of Business Finance and Accounting. Before joining FIU, he served for about a decade as a senior economist and advisor with private and government agencies in the Washington metropolitan areas. This includes agencies such as the State of Maryland Department of Economic and Community Development, Synergy Incorporated, the U.S. Department of Energy, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Dr. Parhizgari's keynote presentation today is on heterogeneous beliefs about climate change. Very interesting and current topic for all of us. Parhizgari, floor is yours. Do you want to unmute yourself?
I think I have done it. I'd like to pull the presentation. If you don't mind, just a second with me. Okay. There we go. Okay. Very good. I think we are set. Good, great. Okay. First, I'd like to thank everyone again. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. It reminded me of an occasion that I had in 2017 to be on your campus when Dr. Nick Bach was the program chair of Global Finance Conference. We had a good time there. And I recall that I always envied your campus, being close 25 miles or so from the center of New York City and having a lot of space and holding presidential debate and all those things. They were good events. I am wondering whether you are going to have the next presidential debate being held on your campus or not. If you do, I wish you good luck. Okay, now, without further delay, this topic that I would like to share with you appeared on our desk accidentally. We were really looking for something different. But then in the process, we realized that the technological change that was one of our variables, basically buried within the control variables, was fundamentally working a lot better. So we said, okay, let's pay a little bit more attention to that. Okay, now, going forward now, in this process, I like to mention that the theme of our paper here is that innovations seem to run counter to basically the strengthening the belief that there is a climate problem. You know, I'm sorry to say that, but that is the way that the data shows. Okay, or differently, if we want to state it differently, innovations seem to be in harmony with the deniers. You know, which means that in practice, quite often there is a possibility that somehow things will drag on longer than we expect. At this point, I may say that we have really passed the inflection point that we need to pay a lot of attention, a lot more attention to climate change. We are really past that point, but still there are differences in opinion, differences in views and things to that effect. Okay, now, moving forward in this presentation, okay, as you notice from the screen, people are divided. I really cannot explain why, but we may provide an explanation which is hidden, why we don't get a consensus of opinion with regards to global warming and the effect, or global climate crisis, I should say, and the effect on some components or major components in business. Okay. Very good then. The topic, we are not unique in addressing this topic. The topic has been viewed by a bunch of other people, you know. I am just having a few examples for you that, for example, Baladov and the others suggest that housing prices depend on what one believes in them, which is something very different, okay? Huang and others look at a number of variables and measure the firm performance to the extent that they respond to climate change, okay? Novi Marx and others look at the anomalies and the interaction between politics, weather, global warming, sunspots, and all the other problems. Okay. Now, before I move on, I'd like to provide you with a cautionary note. Hopefully, I will not end up this presentation with a view that, okay, technological innovation is going to take care of us, so we really should not pay any attention to all the problems that we have. No, that is not really the objective. Rather, the objective is to show that there is a trade-off between the two significant components that have driven our climate risk and our livelihood. These two seem to be interacting with one another in opposite direction, okay? Therefore, I really don't think that we need to categorize ourselves whether we are among the believers or not, even though we do have certainly a position. The problem that we have is that, having said these few points, I would be remiss if I don't mention that we often find ourselves on the edge. For example, if I take just last week's events, just last week alone, we noticed that March 24 was the warmest month on record, according to EU scientists. We noticed that global reefs are bleaching or are dying. We noticed some flooding in UAE and particularly in Dubai airport, which caught everybody's attention. They mentioned that it had happened 75 years ago. We know that, I guess they were holding the ocean conference in Athens. So there are lots of attention to these problems. Lots of discussions are going on. But then I may say that if we just talk and if we don't deliver, then nothing is going to happen. And there is one characteristic of climate change that quite often it may fall into what I call long-term procrastination. It is there, we are going to do it, but we are ending up procrastinating actual action to rectify the problem. Okay. Now, if long-term procrastination is going to be present, then I may say that the heterogeneity that I am looking at may not be a problem. We just live as we are living today. Now, with this introduction, here are a few charts that I'd like to share with you. That is, on the surface, it looks certainly scary that coral reefs are basically bleaching, But then, on the other hand, I'd like to share with you another slide. On the left-hand side, the reefs look healthy. But within about a year, it may appear that they have come back. So we do have a lot of confusion here. Things are not that straightforward. And all these confusions that we encounter quite often adds to the heterogeneity of our beliefs. Now, this, of course, was the conference that you are probably aware of. Now, then, on top of all this, we have a number of individuals who are really believers in history and what I call it or refer to it as the story of 100 years. Or what was happening 100 years ago, maybe appearing today. It is a cycle on planet Earth that is going to repeat itself, so let's not worry about that. I may say that it fits very well with the deniers, but you question it, is there any truth in that? Okay. Beyond all these footnotes, let me go into our position now. We have three hypotheses here now. The first one, we specify as the following, that the negative impact of climate risk on firms' financial fundamentals. I have returns here, it is just one variable, but we are looking at 10 of them. On the firm financial variables, they are mitigated by technological innovations. Putting it differently, technological innovations mitigate the impact of climate risk. Now, so if you are hoping that that is going to happen, then you may argue that, wait a minute, I don't need to do anything. Not that I am saying, but that is what could come across. Another hypothesis is that the belief that we have in sustained economic growth, and that will be deriving the manager's decision when we create financial policies, that, okay, if this growth is going to continue, it looks like we are still okay now. Then there is a third hypothesis, that our confidence towards the economy from technological innovation development quite often will dominate the investment decisions that we make, which means that for some odd reasons, climate risk is mitigated or is probably put aside for the time being. Okay. Now, how do we do this? Now, I don't want to get into a lot of complex issues with you, but I do my best to open up this black box a little bit, if you don't mind. We use a specification which is on the screen, which technically links 10 fundamentals. I have here the word fundamental. Basically, it consists of 3 measures of profitability, 4 measures of firm policy, and 3 measures of investment activities of the firms. I will brief you on them a little bit later on. So there are 10 measures. We take each of them at a time, and we link them with climate risk, which is the first variable. I am pointing my arrow on it, if I can here. And then innovations, which is technological innovations, and the interaction between the two, which is the climate risk and innovations interacting with one another, plus a bunch of other control variables that are firm related, and a few other control variables that are country related, and then differences, consideration of differences for industry and year effect and an error term. Now, to go back to this detail again, we are using 3,400 firms. So therefore, I here in fundamental is the information on 3,400 firms. K here is the countries that we consider. There are 46 countries in our sample. And T is the time period. We are looking from 2011 to 2018. Now, you may ask me why so short? Well, the climate risk variable that we have, unfortunately, it starts in 2011. We don't have measures for that variable before that point in time. And 2018 happened to be our choice because we were going to avoid the effect of pandemic and all the other things that happened thereafter. Now, with this limitation, we don't need to be worried about the effect of global financial crisis or the effect of pandemic that obviously could have some impact on these estimations, but we don't really need to be worried about them. Generally speaking, the climate risk is expected to have a negative effect on the fundamentals, which means that the coefficient of beta 1 on the screen is expected to be negative, of course, if it is statistically significant. Innovations are expected to have positive effect, which means that the coefficient beta 2 is going to be positive, of course, statistically significant. And when we find the interaction between the two, beta 3 is a crucial variable, a crucial estimate. That really tells us the interaction of the two and who is the winner here. If beta 3 is positive, that means, and if innovation is positive, that means innovation is overcoming the climate risk. If beta 3 is negative, and of course climate risk is negative, then we argue that climate risk is basically the winner in this process. We disregard the others for this presentation, if you don't mind. Now, I am ahead of my screen, I should say that. In this screen, I have specified a little bit more about the details of that equation. The three measures, the first three measures on profitability is related to hypothesis 1. The 4 measures on financial policies are related to hypothesis 2. And the 3 measures on investment reflect hypothesis 3. And the rest of this story. Now, in case you are curious about these measures, I may say that the first 3 measures are cash flows, return on investment, and earnings before interest. That's the first 3. The other 4 measures for financial policies are short-term debt, long-term debt, and total debt, plus working capital management. And the last 3 measures for investment are research and development investment, cash dividend, and expenses and administrative aspects of firm's costs. Now, these being said now, I am in a position to talk a little bit more about the details of what we do. I already mentioned that we have a sample of over 33,000, 46 countries from 2011 to 2018. The climate risk index is obtained from German Watch. It is a very important source for this type of variable. I like to mention that the original CRI index is basically ascending in the following sense, that a lower number indicates a higher impact of climate change. We noticed that in our interpretation, it is easier to reverse it. So we multiply it by a minus sign. So in what we are looking here now, a larger number means a larger climate change. So if the number is 33 versus 5, the 33 indicates a larger impact, okay. And then when it comes to technological innovation, we sort of, it was just by chance that we figured out what to do with this variable. We use an already established measure, which is really the technological or technology exports of some countries relative to their total exports. We made it to basically be a substitute for technological innovation. So if a country has got a lot of exports in the information technology, we assume that that country has a higher level of innovation. So these are related to our variables. Now, on the data, I may also add a few quick comments that no matter what we do, as we also noticed from Dr. Chase's presentation, we may have a lot of inaccuracies in the data. We have come a long way today to basically see what we have. There are different methods of generating the data. I may say that quite often there is no consensus as to which one is better. Just to give you an example for ESG, which is not really in this paper, but it is somewhat related. Berg et al. Look at 6 measures of established ESG. And then when they compare them, they say, okay, these are all measures of ESG that we are using in our studies. When they look at them, they notice that there is a 56% differences between them due to measurement. 38% due to their scope, what they considered or what they did not consider. And then 6% of it is due to the weight. So therefore, this type of data would very easily go one way or the other on it. But I just want to make this comment. Another comment that I like to make is that our data in this study is firm related. We are looking at firms, but then the measure of it the measure of technology and the measure of climate change. These are country specific. They are not firm specific. It would be ideal if we could come up with a firm specific measure of climate risk. I'd like to point out that Dr. Ehsan and I and a few others are right now looking at the possibility of doing that. Of course, I don't know whether we will succeed or not, but it was just a comment on the data. Beyond that, I am ready to walk you into some results. This table, this is too small for your eyes. Let me maximize a little bit. Okay, if I don't mind. Now, there's a lot of numbers here now. I don't need to bother you with all, but I can summarize along the following lines. CRI is the measure of climate risk. ITX is the measure of technology. I have IT and export related together to tell you that, to mention that we haven't forgotten that we got it from the export data. And then the combination, the interaction between the two is in the third line. So therefore, first line is climate risk, second line is technology, third line is the interaction of the two. Now, then in each column, we have one of the variables. For example, in column 1, we have operating cash flow. In column 2, we have return on investment. In column 3, we have earnings before interest. Now, then the estimates are lined up underneath. For example, and then the stars indicate that the coefficients are significant or not, and the level of significance. 3 stars indicate that the significance is 1% or below. Now, if you look at the first, let's look at the second one, for example, that I can give you a little bit more straightforward. We notice that climate risk has a negative effect on return on investment. That is a negative factor, 0.051, and it is statistically significant. However, technological innovation has a positive effect, 0.757, and it is strongly significant, Then if we look at earnings before interest, we notice that climate risk has a negative effect on it. However, technology has a positive effect, 0.860, highly significant. Now, then when we look at the interaction, which is I have marked in blue color, you notice that on the ROI, return on investment, the interaction is 0.008, highly significant, which means that technological innovation overwhelms the negative effect of climate risk. Well, that is a good conclusion that I can draw based on this data. On the other hand, in the other variables, earnings before interest, technological innovation overwhelms the negative effect of climate change, 0.009. Now, on the first one, again, the effect of the combined effect is positive on cash flows. But then there may be a little bit of a confusion here in the following sense that, wait a minute, how come climate change is positive here and technological innovation is negative? Well, there is a lot of discussion on what we expect to see. For example, the argument, there is a lot of prior work in this area on each one of these variables to elaborate on this one. For example, if technological change is present, and if the firms believe that technology is going to be around them and they shouldn't be worried about it, they don't need to hold short cash flows. So that means that the effect of technological change on cash flow is negative. On the other hand, when it comes to climate risk, it makes the companies worried that if there is a climate risk factor, the companies will try to accumulate or they resort to short-term cash flows. So therefore, the effect on cash flow due to climate change is positive. So we have to really be a little bit aware of some of these movements in the interpretation of the overall results. Now, the other results that I have included for you in, let me go back to a smaller screen, okay? Now, in another table, we are looking at other variables. In this one, we have firm policies like research and development, cash dividend. I'm sorry, these are the investments. I skipped one, I think. I skipped one table. These are the firm's financial policies, short-term debt, long-term debt, short-term and long-term, and working capital. The same conclusion can be drawn. I'm not planning to drag you into all the details of these numbers. Now, the next table is the investment position of the firm. You notice that generally speaking, the coefficients that we are basically keen in evaluating is giving us the right sign, and they are statistically significant. Now, all this said, I'd like to point out a few conclusions here in terms of what we may take from this study. Okay. First, as I mentioned, I think earlier, we have really passed the inflection point that questions the necessity of attention globally to climate change. So I hope that I'm not coming across in this presentation to gather or to persuade anyone that one way or the other they should disregard the problem of climate risk or climate change. That is not the intention of this study. The intention of this study is that there may be a mitigating effect in the long run that we should concentrate on, and that is technological change and attention to that one. Now, if we are a believer in that, the second conclusion that I'd like to attract your attention to, if we rely on technological development, it is going to help a lot to the green growth that we are seeking. It makes green growth, innovations, and efficiency a lot faster to come across. Now, the third conclusion that I like to draw is that I cannot forget to mention that World Econ Forum brought a hint to our attention that we have to also be a little bit worried about technological innovation. There is a double-sword edge over here now. Technological innovations could result in income inequalities, cybersecurity problems, all sorts of things that go with it. So therefore, it is not a done deal when we shouldn't let it go as if it is unchecked. So I like to point that in this regard. Now, then I think at this point, I'd like to mention a couple of more things. And that one is that our media sometimes is mixed up with some sensational write-ups. Quite often, some people write about the 100 years that I referred to earlier, that we shouldn't be worried about that. There are authors who are basically mentioning that the so-called poly crisis could come around, and then they may lead us to human, extinction and things to that effect. I am aware of those, but I hope that those items will not basically prevent us from logically looking at these. They do have some good points sometimes. They come very persuasive. Since the prior presentation was on artificial intelligence and huge databases, For example, the line of argument is that if you leave it unchecked, it is going to cause a demise for humanity. Or if you just basically look at the population problem that we have, because the growth is dropping, that the collapse of population could bring about the demise of humanity, or all the other issues like nuclear explosions and things, the other things that go along with it. So quite often the argument could be presented in a very persuasive basis, but I should say that yes, sometimes the problems spark into a brief bust, and it causes intense results that we have to cope with. But then in the long run, there are some issues that are with us, and we really cannot forget that. Okay. I think my time is up, and I am with you, and thank you for listening. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Parhizgari. And
You're
also
welcome.
thank you for your kind words about the campus. While
Oh,
you
you're
envy our campus, we envy your weather down in Florida.
Oh, thank you.
So
Okay.
Laura, it's
Yes,
manage the question.
thank you to both of our keynotes. I don't see any questions in the chat or the Q&A. Does anyone have a question they would like to ask to either of our keynotes?
So let me ask the first question to Brad. So Brad, you started off your presentation and ended it with saying that AI did not do a good job as far as the real estate market was concerned. So is this a problem with the analyst who was communicating the process and the results, or was it a problem with the fact that AI is not applicable at this stage with real estate, or both of those?
So I would say there are two separate issues. One is that AI is getting a huge amount of attention right now, but what is getting a lot of attention is large language models. And large language models will be extraordinarily useful, probably are already extraordinarily useful for very limited purposes. But as lots of observers have pointed out, at the moment, they're terrible. They're just absolutely terrible. And so you have to think very carefully through your problem, and then figure out whether the AI that is available to you is good enough to solve that problem. And part of my point is the answer is yes, but not large language models for doing things like target market selection and location evaluation. Large language models may be great for things like first draft of legal documents. I don't do that. I'm an economist. So I don't care whether they're good at that. What I care about is what forms of artificial intelligence can be used for our purposes. And as I said, we do use machine learning models, and they're great. But they take a lot of thinking about sort of what we're trying to do, which variables are going to be useful. How do we evaluate the success of the model? Because we don't want to be putting something, making something available to our own colleagues or to our investment partners that turns out to be trash, because that destroys our own credibility. So artificial intelligence is no substitute for non-artificial intelligence. You've got to do the work to think through the models. You've got to think through them effectively, which means you have to be well trained, and you can't afford to be promising too much from artificial intelligence that is available without much effort. So put the effort into it, you'll get terrific results. Very, very, very few real estate companies have been willing to put the effort into it, have been willing to invest in it, because they are used to going to cocktail parties. They are used to driving around cities, and they are used to talking about about the insights they have developed based on those two ways of gathering data. And that's why so many real estate projects are bad, either in the sense that they lose everything, or in the sense that they don't make as much money as they should. Our company is trying to get away from that model.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat or the Q&A. So if there are no other questions at this time, I will turn it over to Professor Zhou for the next portion of our program.
Thank you, Laura. So welcome, everyone. It's a great pleasure to have you here with us today. I'm Michael Zhou, and I will be the moderator for the panel discussion. We have a fantastic lineup of 5 panelists who will be sharing their insights with us. Following their presentations, we will have a Q&A session where you can ask your questions. However, we kindly request that you defer all the questions until all panelists have presented. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Leonard Ante for his presentation. Dr. Ante is the CEO and co-founder of the Blockchain Research Lab. Leonard, you have the floor for the next 15 minutes. Welcome.
All right, thanks a lot for having me. Let me share my screen. So first of all, sorry if I'm a bit sweaty and I'm sitting on my couch, but I caught a flu. But this should not be the biggest problem, and I should manage. So, hi everyone. My name is, as was just told, Leonard Ante, and I'm managing director of a nonprofit research institute in Hamburg, Germany, and we deal with everything relating to blockchain technology and also crypto assets. And today I will give a brief impulse on the topic of, well, blockchain in real estate and also real estate in blockchain, because these are 2 different aspects or points of view that make sense to distinguish. So first of all, what is blockchain? Some of you may know what it is, some of you may not. So let's quickly provide a high-level introduction to that. So right now, or before blockchain came, we were in the Internet of Information. And whenever I send an email to someone, this email is a copy. And anyone who receives this email can copy it as often as possible, forward it everywhere, and I lose track of who actually owns my, who actually holds a copy of my text and my email, and how often was it forwarded to different addresses, and potentially this information can be copied 1,000 times. That's why we are not able to send actual value like money via mail or via the internet. And that's why we need intermediaries such as banks for online banking. Well, that's where blockchain comes along. And now we actually have a decentralized protocol that takes the role of the intermediary to provide this degree of security for transacting value on the web. So now we have this fictive blockchain mail where the original file, the original email is always sent to the recipient. The recipient now owns this email and can only forward it. And I, as the original sender, can always check on the blockchain at any time whether the file changed hands again. So this is just an example of an email. It could be a picture, it could be a contract, it could be money, it could be real estate. And this is the main idea behind blockchain that you need to understand. It's a secure option on the web to represent and to transfer value. Next slide. So what do these what are tokens? Tokens are essentially some very old concept to represent any sort of values, and they can be analog or digital. So a couple of 1,000 years ago, we had ballstones on the Yap Islands that represented social prestige. If I want to go to the ferry to use a carousel, I can use a token to access it. And now we have these sort of tokens, which are digital programmable containers on blockchains that can take any sort of value. So whatever I define a token to be, this token can represent. So if I want this token to be money, like the US dollar, then I can say, yeah, I put $1 in my bank account, and this token right here represents this US dollar. And now we have a digital US dollar token, which is one of the biggest use cases for actual blockchain tokens. And other options would be, of course, well, I have a property or I have a piece of land and I want to represent this online and I want to transact it. That's why I issue a token that now represents this type of land. So these tokens on blockchains can essentially represent everything virtually, any traditional financial instrument, and even more. So at the bottom of this visualization, you can see some traditional asset classes, and on the top, you can actually see various blockchain token or blockchain asset classes, let's call it like that. And I colored 3 of these in red because these are the ones that actually are most relevant for real estate. Well, for real estate itself, lots of different asset classes are, of course, relevant. But since this is only an impulse, we will focus on some major components. And these are actual real asset-backed tokens and non-fungible tokens. So let's first start with the real asset-backed tokens. And this is actually the piece of the talk where I talk about what blockchain can actually bring to the real estate sector. And one major benefit that blockchain can bring is fractional ownership. So investors are able to acquire small shares in any sort of real estate. And now we can actually have this real estate divided into millions of pieces, tradable as tokens, have these tokens be used for funding, for financing, and also for trading these on secondary markets. And this is very interesting because it actually brings new access to liquidity. And well, you may never be able to own a skyscraper, but you may be able to own 1/1,000,000th of a skyscraper now. So this may be interesting for people that do not have access to opportunities in the real estate sector to now have more opportunities to diversify. And these types of investment already exist, and it's a small market that is maturing now and that is growing over time. And my feeling is that similar to regular stock markets, we see some sort of convergence between traditional financial markets and blockchain markets, where potentially in 10 years, everything is just being transacted and administered by blockchain, and no one actually talks about blockchain existing anymore because it's just an underlying basis protocol like HTTPS when we use our internet browser or so. So fractional ownership is one major use case that is highly relevant. The other one is to actually represent a house or something as an NFT, to make it transferable, and then to split off different rights that relate to the one estate. So in this case, we would have one non-fungible token that represents the house, and one non-fungible tokens that actually represents the rights to the cash flow from this house. And this is interesting because now we have quite some more options to actually create tokenized baskets of real estate properties and their cash flow and bundle them together and since blockchain is a fully transparent technology, we will always see the underlying and we will always see what's going on. So this may be the path to actually have highly complex financial real estate products in the future, which are, however, fully transparent and thus less risky if we think back to financial crisis that somewhat related to real estate or complex real estate financial products. So as an impulse, these are just two options where blockchain can actually bring great benefits to the real estate sector. And now I want to quickly highlight something a little more exotic. And this is actually real estate on the blockchain. And here I bring the example of the digital real estate in the metaverse. And on the right-hand side here, you see the map of a metaverse land project called the Sandbox. And it consists of, I think, 160,000 parcels of digital land. And each land is actually represented as a virtual token. And it's $1 billion market. And when you own this specific token, first of all, you can, of course, trade it, but you can also rent it out. You can build experiences on top of it, and you can build houses on top of it. And major brands and companies have actually bought or built on these digital lands, which may also be the major factor why these metaverses or these digital real estate projects have been so successful. So for example, Snoop Dogg or Steve Aoki, Adidas, Warner Brothers, Ubisoft. So really large and well-known companies or artists actually joined these digital lands and built their experiences there and hold metaverse virtual reality concerts there. And Adidas built an online shop where you can actually go with your digital avatar through their shop and look at shoes. And this has led us to the question how these different brands actually relate to the pricing of these lands and what actually determines the value of metaverse land. Because if we think about real estate in general, travel distance is one of the major aspects that determines value of land and houses. So if I'm closer to the city center and if I'm closer to public transportation, etc., my land or house may be more valuable. But in this digital metaverse land ecosystem, there is no travel distance, and I can jump from A to B in a second. So how can we actually explain very large price differences that occur in these different sales of digital land? And what we actually did was we analyzed how land prices changed whenever some influencers or large companies joined the metaverse and actually announced that they bought a certain piece of land. And on the right-hand side here, you can see that, two panels, and the left panel are all land sales in the Sandbox metaverse before Snoop Dogg announced his land that he purchased land. And on the right-hand side, you can see all land sales after Snoop Dogg announced his land purchase. And the axis is actually the distance to Snoop Dogg. And now you can actually see that at distance 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we have huge price increases of land prices. So we have this sort of proximity signaling and meaning transfer effect in the metaverse, which is quite interesting because, well, we have some novel real estate economics that are quite interesting to analyze. Well, while real estate for blockchain and digital real estate may be quite an interesting topic and may also be a potentially promising topic, it's very relevant to note that this is quite an immature market. Markets are rather illiquid and they are highly correlated with broader NFT and crypto markets. So be careful if you decide to interact with them. All right, I think that's it from my side. Thanks a lot and happy to discuss
Thank you,
later.
Leonard. Our next speaker is Mr. Sam Delmagani. Mr. Delmagani is the principal analyst at AI Multiple. Sam, you have 15 minutes to deliver your presentation. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. And yeah, quick intro. So I've been working on B2B tech for the past 20 years, and I'll be talking about non-intelligent, sorry, what was, how was this exactly phrased by Brad? Artificial non-intelligence. So I think I should just jump into it to give you a bit more sense of what I think about it. And we will focus quite a bit on Gen AI as well because it's the hottest new thing, but it's also impactful in certain activities. And this is going to be a bit thinking about where it can take us. So first of all, quickly sharing couple slides. So why are we talking about artificial intelligence? Well, because eventually machines are going to get super smart. They are going to get as smart as us. If this was a video, you would see the power of exponential growth here, and you would see that machines which start at relatively dumb levels can reach our levels of intelligence thanks to exponential growth. And as Brad also mentioned, generative AI, large language models, are definitely not the only piece of artificial intelligence. So, you know, this is the typical curve of technology development. We start with some hype, and with Gen AI, I think we are past the peak hype. So people are getting a bit more, let's say, realistic about what it can and it cannot do. And with some other machine learning approaches like deep learning, we are more at more maturity stages. There is less hype and people are looking into it from a more practical point of view. And there are also things like symbolic AI, which are for today's audience, they are not even AI. They are just if and then sort of rules. So in short, over time, when things start to work, we stop calling them artificial intelligence and they just become tools that we use. And you know, the coolest things that we hear about today, such as large language models, etc., they are also on that path. And you probably know this, these things are making money for some people. So OpenAI reached $1 billion in revenues faster than anyone else. So that was yeah, good for them, and also eventually good for businesses as well that use these technologies. So one thing to discuss is, okay, this thing is you know, is good. It has some potential. So why are we not using it? Why are people not so optimistic about it today? So there are a few challenges. We talked to quite a few enterprises. I mean, we are an industry analyst. We help enterprises figure out how to use technology. And there are these two types of attitudes. First of all, there is the perceived difficulty of implementation. So people can be thinking, it's easy. I'll put together just a few open source libraries, and then there'll be a cool solution out there. Or you can also see attitudes like, this is serious, this is complicated, we will take years to properly put this into production. And then privacy is extremely important because, garbage in, garbage out. So we have to use our own data that we improved ourselves. And over there again, there are a few approaches. On the one extreme, there is let people do whatever they want. On the other extreme, there is, we can't share anything. Our data is sacred. We have to protect it. And let's look at these approaches quickly. So on the one hand, let's say laissez-faire, let people do whatever they want with data, let them use it with whichever large language model they like online. Well, quite a large percent of data breaches, they involve data on the cloud. So shadow data, where organizations don't even know where the data rests, they can be more easily breached. So in short, this increases the attack surface of an organization. And it is something that businesses need to be mindful about, at least. And when people say, it's easy, we'll just pull together some open source libraries and do it. And then, things like this happen. People buy cars for $1 because the large language model just decides to give things away. It's hallucinations. So machines, large language models are able to make up things. And some of these are actually not just jokes, but they are costing companies money. So Air Canada outsourced part of its customer service to a large language model. And then the model made up a policy and they had to pay for that policy. So in short, it can be expensive. And on the other side, when companies say, I cannot share my data, it's there's of course significant danger out there, etc. There's quite a bit of solutions that are being built to deal with such issues. So in short, there are some solutions being developed. And of course, one of the most common approaches is, let's wait it out. Let's wait for the technology to mature. But in some domains, it is a productivity holy grail, programming. If you are developing without a large language model these days, your productivity is impacted. According to studies, you are going to spend more time doing a similar piece of work, and it also can make you more satisfied as an employee. But of course, then we can ask ourselves, okay, let's get back to the original question. Then why is everyone not using it? It's such a productivity holy grail. The value that it adds is comparable to a lunch, to a free lunch, once a month or once a week. It depends on the person. But in short, people are seeing this like a free lunch. It's not something that is completely changing their lives. Even when developers, people who can benefit a lot from these technologies, use them. So in short, the productivity story is also currently a bit complex, but this is to be expected. So when we were able to browse the internet with Netscape in '94, we didn't have software as a service. We were just using it just like we used our phone to get some information, but slightly faster. But Salesforce, software as a service, that's something entirely different. It's a way of delivering software solutions over the cloud without maintenance. Most people may not remember the days of legacy software where you needed to, on your own premise, you needed to manage servers, you needed to update them. There were all sorts of hardware issues, software issues, etc. So it transformed how software solutions are delivered. And that led to a massive rise in valuation of technology companies in the past 25 years. And similarly, with ChatGPT, we were able to use large language models. We are able to use them to create some text, create some code, but the technology existed about 7-8 years before as well. And it was much more in primitive stages. But just like Netscape opened up web browsing, ChatGPT opened up generative AI for quite a few people. But it's going to take years for users to really identify, to redesign their workflows, to embed these solutions in their workflows. So in short, they work differently. And their tools will also need to be redesigned, rethought. And it's a process. It's going to take years. But at the end of it, we are going to be working in significantly different ways. For example, now CRMs are like smart spreadsheets for us. But 5 years from now on, they could be just a prompt that is telling us which customer to call, what's a unique value proposition to mention, etc. And the main value will come from this style of rethinking the processes, the workflows, and also the solutions. So if we just look at how these technologies create value, at the smallest value that can be achieved is by using a single tool like GPT-4. But if we could use all large language models, even all machine learning models, they create a certain level of value. But when we combine them with enterprise data, the value is of course significantly higher. But if we cannot embed them in enterprise workflows, if we cannot embed them into the way that we work, then the value that we capture will always be limited. And the further that we go in these circles, of course, the more effort it takes. So how to get started? Super quick overview. If the solution for what you need is out there, you can just use it, and you can see it here. On the for a more sophisticated approach, you can look at how much value you can get and what is the differentiation of your data, and then selectively decide sometimes to build your own solutions, like in these gold mines, or sometimes to go with a commodity solution that is out in the market. And some emerging best practices. So always starting with data and use cases. About a year ago, companies invested into these tools pretty much to invest into something new and cool that they thought that could bring their business to new places that could completely change things. That is unfortunately not the case. We have to start with burning issues. We have to start with use cases where the company has a strategic focus, and this technology can serve that focus. And then, of course, conducting good market research, understanding what's out there, deciding between in-house and buying a solution. And there are quite a few things to pay attention to, but minimizing data risk, using various types of encryption approaches or synthetic data, looking into pricing carefully. These are all important aspects. AI Multiple has a ton of research on use cases and also on vendors, so feel free to check us out online. And pricing, just won't go into details, but some solutions are ridiculously cheaper than others, so be aware of that. And human in the loop, finally. So most of these solutions require humans in the loop to help them when they get stuck, when they make up things. So Amazon had just walk out technology where you could grab something from the store and just go out and you get charged correctly, etc. How did it happen? Thanks to about 1,000 workers or hundreds of workers in India. So similarly, how was ChatGPT built? Yeah, OpenAI had a ton of computing power and they collected a ton of data from the web, but they also got Canyon workers to take out toxic material. So in short, humans that make these systems work, that has of course a commercial cost, but also a cost that is not just in the financial sense, and we need to be aware of those as well. Thank you very much indeed, and yeah, feel free to connect whenever you are thinking about implementing AI or Gen AI in the enterprise. Happy to share our war stories.
Thank you, Sam. Our next speaker is Ms. Elizabeth Eby. Ms. Eby is the Portfolio Controls Financial Engineer, EPMM, I'm sorry, Finance and Consumers Energy. Elizabeth, the floor is yours for the next 15 minutes. Welcome. You may need to unmute yourself, Elizabeth.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. And can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, thank you. I think, just before I kick it off, the topics and everyone's discussion has been fantastic. So obviously everyone's tying into the real estate and technology overarching theme. So it's fantastic and exciting to be a part of. Essentially, as stated, I'm a portfolio financial controls engineer with CMS Energy, working with different assets within the company and working to fund those with treasury monies and or financing options, whether that be syndication on the open market and or with investment bankers and or other financing options in order to essentially grow the business, whether that be inorganically or organically. So with that said, I'll move next. In my experience, I've worked with and currently that structural and transactional finance in that investment space in the capital markets, and very heavily in enterprise and model risk, asset management and liability, energy and infrastructure, and financial technology. And essentially the backbone to what I've worked on through the years and even in my studies is that real estate component, essentially that bundle of rights, and how it drives obviously shelter and agricultural needs, and really is that foundation to the global marketplace. Real estate and technology, as we know, it's essentially inseparable pair. Many ancillary components, a few are listed here. And then that even, broadens to be even more components and subcomponents. And focusing on the blockchain database and technology, which we've a little bit focused on or talked about so far, essentially that being, that decentralized and distributed digital ledger for records and digital transactions across multiple computers or systems and platforms. They allow high immunity, I can't pronounce that word, which is once data is recorded that it can't be altered and or deleted. So that is a benefit, and any of those changes are recorded. So that's for any type of asset specific to real estate. That is fantastic. I don't know who all has worked with different types of real estate transactions and deals, but I think a lot of the components can get hairy and also very convoluted, and or have deals go sour, including that financing and funding, when there's the record keeping is a little bit scattered and or hard to find. With that blockchain, as it's decentralized, and with the cryptic techniques, it is more secure than traditional databases for the reasons I just mentioned. Essentially that is different than those traditional databases that are centralized and not assessed by many. So kind of broadening the access of the database and or the network and or the network type. That's extremely beneficial. And cryptographically, it verifies users and multiple links and chains within that blockchain database and technology for recording, and it builds on each other, so it increases likewise the security of that digital asset. Again, verification processes are inherent securing ability to verify information and data, where increasing the accuracy of record keeping. Here we just have essentially high-level blockchain structure diagram. As you can see in the middle here is that network of spaghetti arms where information and or links and chains are essentially exist at the nodes of information on the exterior, then followed by that exterior shell being the ledger. Those network types are a few: public network blockchain, private network blockchain, and federated network blockchain. So all of these have a little bit different components as far as permissions of the network and mining processes, as well as who can access how and when. And essentially then that is, is essentially overarched by different security measures too that come in many different forms. That being that validation from peers, that individual encryption, as well as that chain to previous block. Diving into the specific blockchain and real estate, again, that overarching theme of blockchain and digital assets are those virtual connections, and essentially streamlining real estate payments, provides greater liquidity and access to funding, and creates new opportunities for new forms of investment. It opens the door for different individuals and or companies that may not have that valuation book value or funding for larger projects and or assets to essentially get into the game. Synergies, essentially new companies and technology platforms for the real property or real estate transactions are essentially quote unquote called those smart contracts. And those are digital legal contracts. And those terms and conditions are essentially written in code, and they have to be verified on that blockchain, which increases that security measure. And then two, that if there's a condition that's essentially not met within a specific time frame, the contract is void. So that is a safeguard and control of that smart contract. The smart contracts, essentially removes associated costs that would be there otherwise, therefore passing on costs to the parties involved in the transaction itself. And one of the components that is still underway as far as vetting and research is that financial conditions and having that be secured as well. So that, again, is underway. Smart contracts essentially, reduce that real estate life cycle and transaction durations as it is that digital asset and able to essentially be accessed and essentially grow at any time through and by the associated and applied parties. Asset tokenization, we kind of spoke of that before. I think it was Ally who had mentioned that, or no, I'm sorry, Lennart. So that asset tokenization is essentially, investing by tagging a digital link or a chain by code, and then that tokenization position is verified on blockchain, making online property transfers easier. That tokenization is used to divide, large real estate assets and or valuations that can be easily individual purchased. Then, pointing back to essentially opening the market for different types of investors and or people to essentially join in the investing of real estate when they wouldn't be able to otherwise. And essentially too, on that token, that ownership verification is done through that blockchain rather than that, traditional chain of title of records. So that's another benefit as far as decreasing the life cycle of real estate transactions. Again, the asset tokenization and that blockchain component of that investing, opens those new investment opportunities and helps reduce barriers. Again, fractional ownership too is that quote unquote term, and Lennart had spoke to that as well before. So again, just being able to have different methodologies for investments, and I think, essentially really opening the door for the real estate investment community to grow, as well as increasing that finance and funding availability. Here we just have a life cycle diagram kind of showing that buyer-seller transactional space with that blockchain application. That blockchain application, comes in different applications, different companies, etc. And then just walking through the cycle to essentially buy, sell the property on the platform itself, then basically create that smart contract, and then essentially close loop cycle here. In summary, essentially that, the blockchain and or that digital asset for real estate specifically, as there's a lot of title and ownership, I think, issues, cloud on that real property. It expands the transparency, helps increase that scalability of things to get done, research to get done, documentation to be found, and it improves that real estate liquidity, decreases cost to the real estate transactions themselves, and then provides greater access for different investors, and then no data in silos due to that coded link and chains. And here we have just some references of information that are actually very, very good. A couple are a little bit older, but still very good to look through. So I guess with that said, with what I do too in the energy, real estate, asset, and treasury space, blockchain technology is not something that is necessarily adopted now, but I think that it will be, and it does have large benefits. I do think that there is, the biggest risk that it shares is maybe some control measures being put on it by the regulatory bodies once it does launch. But otherwise, the blockchain is here and it's applied across every industry. And I think there's huge momentum with the AI growing as it is, at the pace it is, as well as that technology growth sector. And that is it.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Our next speaker is Dr. Amir Moradi. Dr. Moradi is the chair of the Economics and Finance Department at the Hein International School of Business, Netherlands. Amir, the floor is yours for the next 15 minutes. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Let me share my screen firstly. Okay. My presentation is gonna be about application of AI in finance. Now in general, we have like 5 different categories when it comes to use of AI in finance in different domains. And the first category is about customer service and personalization. The second category is about investment opportunities that can be explored by using AI. The third category is about fraud detection and risk management, and number 4 and 5 are related to compliance and regulations and operation automation. So this presentation is about explaining each single category that I explained, and to give you some examples in practice. Also, if there are like research avenue related to that, I'm gonna talk about that one as well. So the first category is mainly about chatbots and robo-advisors that can be used. So this type of, let's say, apps can help companies to advise their customers or answers their questions, and they can also help companies to automate some routine tasks inside their company. So a famous chatbot in this case is Kai, that is designed by MasterCard, and normally this bot is sold to banks. And as you can see, some examples are provided here. So if a customer wants to know how much he has spent on, let's say, going and eating out, so now like in January or December, the chatbot can easily like aggregate all the money that he has spent in restaurants and give him the answer. Also, if somebody is looking for a specific amount to spend and wants to know, okay, where this money has gone, so the bot can answer that one as well. So this chatbots and robo-advisor can be combined by the other categories that I will explain to serve a specific like purpose. Second category is about investment opportunities, and normally these days companies are using algorithm trading, and also this is a opportunity for individual investors as well. So the way that they do it is that they use like machine learning AI algorithms that can assess the past and present market trends, and then they can actually find out the patterns that exist in the underlying assets, and then they can predict the future prices in this case. So by doing that, they are gonna make some analysis that how the future prices in the market is gonna be. And based on the algorithm they receive, they can actually settle some real-time transactions, or they can design some investment strategies to like maximize the return for their clients. So one platform that gives the individuals to define this type of algorithms is Interactive Brokers, and then each single individual can go there and design his own platform, and then based on that, the algorithm, let's say, implement the strategy. So lots of academic research also has been done in this topic. I also have done a research related to that with my colleagues at the Hunt. And the idea of that paper was that in crypto market, there are some parallel exchange markets, and there is like a kind of price differences among these platforms. So there is an arbitrage opportunity for traders that if they buy from one platform, they exchange market, and they transfer to the other exchange market through their e-wallet, and they sell it there, so they can make an arbitrage, like say, profit in this case. So, and in our research, we realized that for a certain period of time, this opportunities exist in the market, but after a while, the gap closes very soon. So, especially when there is a kind of a new news or a new anomaly in the market, this arbitrage opportunities exist or they widen. So the second category that AI can help is about portfolio management. So in this case, some like platforms can be defined that they are going to analyze a large volume of financial data to talk about risk and returns and recognize investment trends. In this case, a good example can be Wealthfront, that is a robo-advisor that uses AI algorithms, and they manage the portfolio for their clients. So as is written in the slides, so as of November 2023, they had like $50 billion asset under management. The interesting part about this robo-advisor is that they are like goal-setting robo-advisors. For example, the client can set that I want to buy a house, and these are like the sources of income that I have. Can you plan my financials to reach the target? So then the platform can, let's say, give a plan to the client that you need to do this saving, and after that you can actually have a down payment for buying a house like after 2-3 years. So the interesting part is that the client can set the goal for the app in this case. Third category is about fraud detection and risk management. So when it comes to fraud detection, AI platforms or algorithms go after analyzing data of the users, like their location, transaction history, and their intention is to find anomalies and patterns that are not consistent with the history of the client. So when they recognize this type of things, they're going to put a red flag there, and this is going to be like a kind of source of further investigation. So for example, PayPal is using a fraud detection system in this case for its client. And also lots of banks following that one consider somebody that has like a kind of turnover of $1,000 per month in his bank account, and all of a sudden like $50,000 goes to his bank account. So it can be like an anomaly for that guy, and it can be a source of further investigation. When it comes to risk management, so AI can help companies to design different scenarios, and based on those scenarios can give like valuable insights to the client. So one of the interesting platforms that we can see in the market is Aladdin platform, that originally was designed by the risk management part of BlackRock, but right now some companies, including BlackRock, is using that for also portfolio management. You know that BlackRock almost has $10 trillion asset under management, but as BlackRock is starting like accepting some subscriber for this platform, right now the total asset under management by Aladdin is close to $21 trillion. Big number it is. The other category is about compliance and regulation. So in compliance, that is like a reactive procedure, AI can help like companies to like a little bit accelerate the procedure. So for example, one company called C3 AI, they're helping other companies with the procedure that is called Know Your Customer, or KYC, and they're gonna by use of AI, they are going to check the background of client in terms of like criminal activity, potential risk, or any other elements to realize whether this is a good customer to have a contract with. Or they can actually deal with proactive due diligence procedures. Then they are going to get a large volume of financial data, and they start like analyzing them. Especially this specification is used in M&A deals these days. so merger and acquisitions ones. And the last category is about operation automation. So, and in this case, companies are gonna find the type of repetitive tasks that they have that is very time consuming for their employees as well. And occasionally they face human error. And if they automate them, then it will be like very quickly done by AI, and it's gonna like free up the valuable time of their employees. So the example is like automating accounting operations. This day happen a lot, especially related to accounts receivable and accounts payable. We are observing that a lot in the companies. And this one is gonna like help companies to focus on the area that is gonna add more value to shareholders at the end. So I try to manage it very quickly to leave some room for the Q&A part as well. So I hope you enjoy.
Thank you, Amir. We will have the Q&A after all the speakers presented. So our next speaker is Mr. Joseph McBride. Mr. McBride is the Senior Director of Moody's Analysis CRE Commercial Real Estate Product. Zhou, you have the floor for the next 15 minutes. Welcome.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me. We're starting to lose people. It's getting towards the end, so hopefully we can rally for the last couple minutes here. So I will share my screen, and I must admit that I was going to do more of a market update or just kind of what we're seeing in our commercial real estate data. But given all the, obviously it's a real estate and tech meeting, I'll just talk quickly about kind of what Moody's is doing as well. So Mike, you're seeing my full presentation screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. So a lot of people know who Moody's is, big, giant ratings agency. But we also have another half of our business, which is in the analytics space. So software and data and credit models across all different asset classes. Within Moody's Analytics, we have a commercial real estate operating unit, which I'm a part of. And breaking down just into commercial real estate, what we do, we have massive foundational commercial real estate data sets that we've built up over the last many years. Property level data, performance information, lease listings, sales transactions, lease transactions, market data, sub-market data. Everything Brad Case was showing at the very beginning are, our data along with other data providers does or can feed into that kind of analysis. We have tons and tons of lender clients, bank clients that use our data and models to underwrite new loans or to portfolio manage current loans or to forecast losses or do account allowance for losses in accounting. So foundational data sets across the bottom. We have workflow tools. We have a kind of an industry standard commercial real estate lending underwriting origination software called Credit Lens. That's actually really a very good product here. We have a industry standard commercial real estate credit model, CMM, used for all those fun things like DFAST and CCAR stress testing and CECL allowances and board reporting and scenario analysis and so on and so on. It's not AI. It's classic regression and statistical modeling and Monte Carlo simulation and everything else like that. We can say it's AI if you just think AI is fancy math. And then we've been over the last couple of years building a commercial real estate portfolio monitoring tool, of which we're putting our first iterations of Gen AI and early warning mechanisms into that tool right now as we speak. But all of this kind of nicely flows together because data powers workflow, data and workflow power the credit models, and vice versa, right? So we've got banks loading in rent rolls and operating statements and servicing records and all those types of things. We could never, ever touch that data at a granular level, but we can use it to inform market and sub-market level analysis. Bunch of screens here. We do a lot of cool stuff. If you're interested, feel free to reach out to me. Loan stuff, portfolio stuff, commercial real estate property level stuff. I will say that in my experience dealing with most of the large, well, tons and tons of banks, and then also just day-to-day commercial real estate folks, the long tail of commercial real estate is still doing everything in email and Excel and on their phone. So there's that classic cliche of commercial real estate. The industry is 10 years behind in terms of technology. It is a cliche, but cliches usually have a lot of truth to them. So, even simple things like getting your data into the cloud or getting your, moving out of Excel and into something else. I mean, it's a battle we fight every day. And by the way, I'm a big fan of Excel. You'll pry Excel from my cold, dead hands someday before I have to start using other tools. Now, we don't have to talk about this. We've got lots of data from commercial real estate, from a commercial real estate perspective, market, property. I went through it. But one of the things that we do have is this expansive network of clients, both brokers, lenders, asset managers, appraisers. We've got tons of the industry on various products of ours. And then, of course, we've got the rest of Moody's Analytics. We have a giant KYC business, which powers some of our entity resolution on the tenant side and on the property side. We've got one of the leading providers of catastrophe and climate risk modeling called RMS. So it all kind of intertwines with some stuff that's been talked about already today. And that's what's kind of nice about being at such a big company like Moody's, is that we have so many internal resources that we can tap, as well as we've got hundreds and hundreds of researchers putting data into our tool every single day. Now, in terms of, let's say, getting more into this technology and AI stuff, if I think about how we're evolving, we start with just, you need the data. If AI, like a chatbot, is useless to me if there's nothing behind it, right? Or a statistical model, you can't make one if you don't have underlying data to build it on top of. So that's what we've been doing for the last several years. We've also been connecting this data to client information, specifically around rent rolls and operating statements. We've built a very nice ingestion engine that pulls all that data in, OCRs it, categorizes it, gives the user a little bit of guided workflow to make sure that it got it right, and then digitizes that data into a standard form. Once that happens, you can do tons of work with that. I mean, like I said, everyone's still working off outputs from Argus, from Yardi, from MRI, from RealPage, from all these different systems, and they're all a big mess, right? So getting that information, I mean, I always say that real estate starts in Excel, it goes into a pretty PDF, and then on the other side of the transaction, it's someone trying to get it out of the PDF into their Excel. It's kind of a crazy scenario, but that's how the real estate world works, or at least commercial right now. It would be great if blockchain could solve that, but you're going to have to convince a lot of people who are very set in their ways. And then as we move to the right, we're working right now on an early warning system, which is quite interesting. We're working with some of the largest banks to kind of tailor it to their needs. But given the fact that we have real-time news as a service, or news data coming inbound, we've normalized tenant names, normalized property addresses, normalized property types, and all that kind of stuff. We can actually connect news stories in real time to properties or markets or categories of properties or tenants, and proactively warn portfolio managers, risk managers, asset managers on things that may not cause a default today, but may cause a default down the line. Something that some of these folks are doing manually today or not doing at all. So a very simple example is, I just saw today, I think it was Express announced bankrupt or declared bankruptcy, and they're closing all their locations, right? So to immediately know, do I have exposure to that tenant in my underlying portfolio? And if so, where is it? And then take the next step and ask it, well, how does this affect my loan risk rating? Or how does this affect my future cash flows? What happens to the property value if they vacate and we replace it with a market rent tenant? So that's the kind of stuff we're working on right now. That's been really exciting. And we like to build with the industry. So we try to pair up with, one of the large banks or one of the large brokerage firms and ask them what they want, how they want us to build the products. This is that, we're not going to go through this, but news data, our own unique CRE data. We have tenant credit risk. Obviously, that's what Moody's is very well known for, is corporate credit. Client data coming through, put it all together in the blender, proactively warn and interpret for the user, and then use the Gen AI chatbot kind of large language model features to let the user quickly interact with all this information. But the hard part is actually connecting all the information to begin with. Once you do that, then everything else becomes kind of a little bit easier. So that was my spiel on tech and what Moody's is doing in CRE. So going into just the market for a minute, what's going on in the market in commercial real estate? I'm getting a lot of headlines on this. Our office vacancy rate is as high as it's ever been. Not super surprising given what's going on. Post-COVID, work from home, everything else. We don't need to relitigate that. Everybody knows it. You could see here, we're still pretty decently down. If you look at the right side, basically what this is telling me is Miami, New York, Dallas, Atlanta are still down, 10 to 25% in terms of office visits or people going to the office on a weekly basis. They are up year over year, so people are getting back to the office, but it's still, I don't think we're ever getting back to where we were before, at least not across all industries. I mean, you see, large banks in New York City and other markets where everyone's back 5 days or 3 days, but I don't think overall you're getting back there for quite some time, if ever. Now, talking about multi, so we are coming into a period where we are getting tons of new deliveries in terms of supply. I'm sure Brad Case probably knows even more about this, but we're seeing rent growth turn over, plateau, and start coming down. Obviously, market to market is different. This is overall. I do feel that we're going to have a little bit of a dearth of new supply, let's say 3 to 5 years from now, because it's very hard to start a new construction project today, given the costs and the cost of capital, and the fact that so many banks are kind of pencils down or almost pencils down in terms of lending. I guess paradoxically, high interest rates are kind of working to the benefit of in-place multifamily right now, because it has, for the first time in a very long time, it's actually more expensive to buy than to rent now, due to the fact that interest rates are so high on mortgages and that there's so little supply of housing available. So the prices really haven't come down like you would have expected given interest rates going up. Retail's doing well, other than some, crummy old malls. Retail's generally doing well. The American consumer is resilient. And you can see here we've had some decent asking rent growth and vacancy declines over the last couple of years and forecasted going forward. Industrial or warehouse, if you think about a warehouse distribution, that's really what most of the industrial is in our world. We had massive rent growth over the last few years. It's kind of cooling off as a ton of new supply has hit the market. And you can see there the vacancy rate kind of hitting a trough in, what was that, later 2022, and then starting to come back up going forward. There's still plenty of demand and plenty of tailwinds in that space, so we don't foresee real issues there. And if you want to bring in the AI piece of it, obviously, data centers and things like that are a huge tailwind to that piece of the market. We've got some sales index here. I'm going to skip over this, but what I want to talk about real quick is just there's always all these big headlines about, maturities, wall of maturities, or like, oh my God, look at how much corporate debt or commercial real estate loans are maturing next year. And if you think about it, this is going to happen every year for the rest of time if the economy continues working the way it does, which is most commercial real estate loans are 3 to 5 years. Obviously, you got some insurance company loans, some CMBS loans out there that are longer, but what that means is every 3 to 5 years, you're recycling the capital and have to refinance those loans. Now, this chart right here is basically just showing you that a lot of the maturities that happened in 2023 or that were expected to happen in 2023 have been pushed out to 2024. Not super surprising, as banks have been, to use maybe a cynical term, extending and pretending in some cases, and also they've just been given a lot of flexibility from their regulators to work out these loans and take their time in working these loans out. So a lot of maturities coming up. And a lot of those maturities are coming into a time when origination volume is severely limited, and are at least the MBA's, Mortgage Bankers Association's projections for this year are not high enough to deal with all of the maturing loans. So we're probably going to continue to see kicking of the can unless something else comes in that forces these banks to start really marking to market or realizing some losses. And you see that in places. You see that in certain banks and certain portfolios coming to market for sale, or certain foreclosures happening, but you're not seeing it en masse like you did in the GFC. Quick nugget here: in CMBS land, commercial mortgage-backed securities land, we have really granular data, so we're able to see what's going on even deeper in that market. And the thing to show here is that of the loans that did come due in 2023, the green portions of these bars are what we're able to pay off successfully, and the blue are what didn't pay off. And obviously office looks the worst in this case. Only 35% of those office loans that came into maturity clean, quote unquote clean, were able to pay off in time. The rest of them look reasonably okay, with the exception of retail, which is mostly driven by those old Class B malls that are causing some issues. One good positive about all of this is that coming into these, the underwriting going into these loans was reasonably conservative relative to what it was, in the early 2000s when we were really in the go-go days. So even though we've seen value loss across the board, really, when you have 35 or 40% equity cushions on a 60 to 65% LTV loan, you have a lot more wiggle room there than what we had going into 2008, 2009. And this is another thing we don't have to cover, and I'm out of time, so I'll call it a day. Thanks everyone for having me.
Thank you very much, Joe. So I've already seen we have some discussions in the chat box. So Brad, do you want to expand on your thoughts here?
Sure. Yeah, the part of the promise, there is a lot of promise in blockchain technology. I think that it's actually likely to make real estate investment, number one, more efficient, and number two, because of that, it will look more and more like real estate investment through publicly traded REITs. But the other piece of it is this idea that tokenization of real estate will have a benefit. And I don't see any benefit of tokenization unless it's to the people who will be paid by the investors in tokens. There is no sense in which tokenization broadens the category of investors or makes it or reduces barriers to entry, except to the extent that it eliminates requirements to meet that it makes it unnecessary to meet SEC requirements, which are there for the benefit of investors. So if the goal is to make it possible for people to invest in real estate without investor protections that come from being SEC registered, I get that. That's not a benefit to investors. There is no other benefit of tokenization. Because tokenization is entirely the same as shares of stock in a REIT.
Thank you, Brad. Hugo, do you have anything? Have a question for Brad or something to add? Dr. Hugo Benedetti?
No, just perhaps one of the other panelists can sort of reply to Brad's comment. I have my own comments, but I think it's more important for the panelists to share than my opinion.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. So Leonard, Elizabeth, I don't know if you want to respond.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I already posted a bit in the chat that I see some potential options where it may bring value. I very
should
much
say that I had some computer trouble, and so there may have been responses in the chat that I missed.
Yeah, but I think also one thing that Hugo pasted in the chat makes a lot of sense. So essentially, with tokenization, these assets become programmable, and this is something that can bring a lot more transparency and automation, which we do not see today. And this also opens an avenue for much more real-time payments, real-time rental contracts, etc., etc. So everything becomes programmable and can be automated. And this is something that traditional real estate products and real estate does simply not offer. And I believe that tokenization is one of the main pillars that you essentially need for this. But tokenization is essentially also only smart contracts. And tokenization is, tokens are smart contracts. That's why to automate things on blockchains, lots of them essentially are tokens. But whenever real estate financial products are offered to retail investors, it's often quite difficult for investor protection. And I also see a big challenge here to actually make sure that, well, we do not get this blockchain market of unregulated securities that are being sold to retail investors. And I think that's a risk, but I believe that someone, well, I think that's about it, what I need to say to that.
So I'm not sure. How about other panelists? Do you have anything to add? Elizabeth, Amir, Sam, Zhou?
Yeah, I think that with the blockchain, there is, well, essentially, I mean, the tokenization, it's a hot point right now, right? So with that, SEC guardrails and controls not fully there yet. It's actively being refined. There was a big major kind of step this past January relative to that BlackRock kind of took forward, but kind of piggybacking on Lennart's, I think there's benefits to it that will further come, and I think it is a digital asset. Not most people are familiar with the technology and different components of that to become comfortable with it, but I think it will grow, and there will be risks, and those will be refined by guardrails and controls by industry experts, regulatory bodies, etc. So,
but if I could sort of follow up on the original question, Leonard was talking about smart contracts, and I don't see why you need tokenization for smart contracts. And by tokenization, what I'm talking about is tokens that can be purchased by individual investors. Never mind whether they're retail or institutional. Smart contracts can be incorporated in real estate everywhere. That I think of as just a piece of the larger blockchain technology, which has a huge amount of promise in real estate. The question that I'm focused on is there any benefit of tokenized investments in real estate being available to investors? And I have not heard of any.
Well, for me, a token is the same like a REIT, to be honest, and it should be regulated the same way. So if it represents the same value, then it should also be SEC regulated. And then I do not see any difference in it. And obviously there will be some black sheep that offer unregulated things via blockchains, and that's a problem then. But I do not see any difference in it, to be honest. It's just a digital new way to do it. And the main thing is, what can you do on top of it? And I think that's where smart contracts and everything come in, because you cannot do smart contracts with traditional stocks, but for that you need actually digital assets. And that's where the tokens come in. But
Yeah.
I'm no real estate expert, and I'm also no expert in the SEC and American law, since I'm based in Europe.
No, and so it sounds like you and I do see eye to eye. The point that I am making is not the fraud issue. The point that I am making is the frequent statement that tokenization enables something new, which is reducing the barriers to entry, and it's just not a correct statement.
Yes. Yeah, a token is just a container, and in that case, it may represent a stock, or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing the thoughts on the tokenization. So we still have about 7 minutes. So let's open the floor to the other audience. Do we have any questions? We may have time for, I don't know, 1 or 2 questions. You can unmute yourself and just ask the question if you have. So I have one question, probably this is for Zhou. So what do you consider to be the most pressing risk currently confronting the commercial real estate market? So this is sent to me in a private message.
Wow, what a question. That's such a giant question. I will struggle to answer it. I think that the most obvious risk is obviously office, and the fact that it has taken up 25 to 30% of lending volumes forever in commercial real estate. And I think that we've been able to muddle along because the banks, which account for most of the lending, even though non-bank lenders have grown, it's still mostly banks and insurance companies. There would have to be some sort of external shock that causes the banks to have to recognize the value of their loans today. Like you saw it with SVB, they made a big sale of a chunk of mortgage bonds, or it was MBS and other treasury stuff that forced them to show their hand to see how much value those particular securities had lost. And then the whole market looked and said, hey, you got another XYZ billion in those on your balance sheet. Holy moly, your equity value is way lower. That has not really happened in commercial real estate because these are not mark-to-market assets, right? They're amortized cost basis assets. So as long as the banks don't all at once say, oh my God, these are all down by 35% in value, then we can all keep kind of dancing along on our merry way. So, and honestly, I think most of that stuff is baked in, and the Fed, even though they've been hard on the market and after being too easy on the market for 12 years, they've been finally kind of showing a strong hand. They will, and they did step in, and they will step in again to save banks. Maybe not all of them, but through repo operations and other things, there's always that kind of Fed put available. So I don't know. I don't know what the biggest risk is. I think it's usually the biggest risk is something that nobody sees coming, because if we saw it coming, then we'd all kind of account for it. So it's really just a liquidity issue right now that I borrowed at 3.5%, and my exit cap rate, like Brad talked about, I thought my exit cap rate was going to be 4.25 or 4.5, and all of a sudden market cap rates are 6.5 or 7. And now I'm sitting there, right, not knowing what to do. So that writ large is what's going on right now, but it feels like the market is kind of muddling through. And the securitization market is kind of humming along reasonably well, which is usually an indicator of financial stress when that thing seizes up. So I didn't answer the question really, but it's because I don't know the answer.
You know, if I could add a couple of thoughts on that, I agree with you, Joe. And I think it's important to note that the risk in real estate is not any number of individual loan defaults. The risk in real estate is what we call the asset correlation, which determines the default correlation, which is to say the risk that they'll go bad at the same time. And you know, if you take the analogy of credit cards have a very high default rate on individual lines of credit, but that's fine because they don't all tend to go bad all at once. Real estate doesn't tend to go bad at all until it all goes bad at the same time. And so the risk is, you know, there is more risk to the extent that an individual lender, such as a bank, has a portfolio that is concentrated by property type and by location and otherwise in assets that have a high asset correlation and high default correlation. This is what I used to focus on when I was working at the Federal Reserve Board.
Thank you, Brad.
I guess one thing I'll just, sorry, now that we're talking about fun stuff in the market, one thing that you're kind of hearing about too is the fact that all that money that was going into the office space, meaning lending and investing, it still exists from pension funds, from banks, from asset managers, everyone. So now it needs to find a new place to go. And that those places are multifamily, industrial, warehouse, data center, self-store. Like a lot of the other asset classes, I think, are somewhat benefiting liquidity-wise from a lot of that money, capital kind of squeezing out into other areas.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers. I think we're just about out of time, but I want to turn it over to Professor Nikbat for some final comments.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you very much. Along with my co-director, Professor Spieler, I would like to thank the wonderful speakers, you know, Brad, Ali, Leonard, Jem, Amir, Elizabeth, Joe. This was quite rich. Thank you very much on behalf of everybody. I want to thank our Dean, Janet Lenihan, who could not be here, our Vice Dean, who always supported us. Without their support, believe me, those conferences will not hold. I want to thank Breslin Center. My colleague, Professor Hofstra, is not here. I want to thank her. Laura, this would not have been possible without all the efforts you put into this. The follow-up, even today morning, you know, everybody, 185 people received reminders because, you know, she thought perhaps, you know, we did not, you know, keep it the right place. Thank you very much. And with that, I'll turn it over back to you, Laura.
Thank you so much. And again, I want to thank you and Professor Spieler for putting the conference together as well. I hope that everyone enjoyed it. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you so much, everyone.